It starts with the heavy silence of a house that is supposed to be at rest. A silence so profound, it feels like a physical weight pressing against your chest. You open your eyes, and there it is, the ceiling. It is 3 in the morning, the dead of night, and yet your mind is as sharp and jagged as broken glass. Your clock says 3:02, ticking away the minutes of a life that feels increasingly unmoored. You are caught in the grip of wakefulness. There was no nightmare to startle you, no sudden noise from the street, and no reason for your heart to be racing. You are simply awake. This is the midnight fracture, that invisible crack in the foundation of your rest that separates the person you used to be from the person you are becoming. In the stillness, you wait for the familiar pull of drowsiness to return, but it remains just out of reach. The morning feels like a distant shore you will never reach, a refusal of the sun to rise and save you from this liminal space. You stare at the shadows, wondering why your body has betrayed the one thing that should be natural. Do you remember the dreams you used to have? Not the fleeting, fragmented flashes that disappear before breakfast, but the vivid landscapes that used to hold you until dawn. The morning sun used to be a welcome friend. For many over the age of 40, the dream life has gone silent. The rich tapestries of our youth have been replaced by a gray, non-restorative void. Vibrant nights are gone. We go to bed, close our eyes, and enter a state that feels less like sleep and more like a forced unconsciousness. When we wake, we do not feel renewed. We feel processed. This transition from restorative rest to a mere holding pattern is the first sign that the internal architecture of our existence is shifting. The color has faded from the night, and in its place is a biological stagnation that leaves us reaching for energy before we have even truly greeted the day. I need you to hear this clearly, because the world will tell you otherwise. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not failing because you feel exhausted after what should have been 8 hours of rest. What you are experiencing is not a lack of willpower. It is a profound biological transition. It is a biological debt. It is real. Sleep is a complex, delicate internal construction project. If you are struggling to keep your head above water, if your memory feels like it is slipping through your fingers, it is because your body is no longer able to maintain the structure it once built with ease. This is not a moral failing. It is a structural one. Think of your sleep as a grand cathedral. In your 20s, this cathedral was sturdy, with high, sweeping arches of deep sleep. But since 40, a quiet dismantling has begun. This is the architectural decay of the human night. The bricks are being removed one by one. This is the structural integrity of your very mind. The slow waves that used to wash over your brain are flattening out. The intricate timing systems are losing their precision. Sleep is dismantling itself from the inside out. We are here to look at those blueprints and see where the cracks are forming. To ensure accuracy, every protocol we share is reviewed by a clinical pharmacist and researcher. We are moving past the surface-level advice to find the molecular truth. The truth of the midnight hour is that your body is trying to help you, even when it feels like it is failing. This is a conversation stripped of pretense, focusing on the raw biological reality of your brain and body. It is attempting to manage chemical signals that are no longer synchronized. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. It is trying to clear out the metabolic waste of a day using a plumbing system that is starting to leak. We are looking at what the body has been trying to do while it fails, and in that failure we find the keys to our restoration. This journey is just beginning. The reason the midnight fracture feels so permanent is that the gears of your internal timing are beginning to slip. Deep within the brain lies a tiny cluster of neurons known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is your master clock. In your youth, this cluster was the conductor of a magnificent biological orchestra, coordinating every pulse and every cycle of rest with precision. But after 40, this clock begins to suffer from fragmentation. The gears are no longer catching. The rhythm that once governed your life with ease is starting to break into disconnected fragments. Think of this clock as a precision instrument that must be reset every day by the sun. This process is called entrainment. When you were younger, your brain was sensitive to the light of morning. The first rays of dawn signaled the suprachiasmatic nucleus to flood your body with cortisol, the hormone of alertness. At the same time, it set a silent timer for the release of melatonin 14 hours later. However, as the brain ages, it becomes desensitized. This is entrainment failure. The master clock loses its ability to stay synchronized with the light and dark cycles of the world. It is as if the biological sensors that kept you anchored to the Earth's rotation have become dull. This loss of sensitivity leads to the melatonin phase delay. Melatonin is the chemical signal that opens the door to sleep. In your 20s, this signal was clear, arriving at the exact moment you needed rest. But after 40, that signal arrives later and weaker. This is the biological reality behind feeling tired but wired. You have spent the day working, and by 10 at night, your body is exhausted. Yet, because the melatonin pulse is delayed, your brain remains on high alert. You are physically drained, but your mind is buzzing with an artificial energy that refuses to settle. The precision of the master clock dictates the timing of your life. When it fails, the timing of your tiredness no longer matches the demands of your schedule. You might feel an urge to sleep at 7 in the evening, only to find yourself wide awake at midnight. This is not a failure of character. It is a failure of synchronization. The environmental cues that used to guide you no longer reach the aging suprachiasmatic nucleus with enough force to trigger the necessary chemical shifts. The master clock is drifting, and as it drifts, the window for restorative sleep begins to narrow. This narrowing window is a frustrating aspect of the post-40 experience. Your body now requires absolute perfection to achieve even a fraction of the rest it once took for granted. In your youth, your circadian rhythm was robust enough to withstand late nights or bright lights. Now, the system is fragile. A single hour of screen time before bed or a slightly too warm room can derail the entire process. This is because the desensitized brain can no longer distinguish between the glare of a smartphone and the rising of the sun. The signals are confused, the timing is lost, and the body remains in a state of perpetual jet lag. Temperature also plays a role in this internal timing. For the brain to transition into deep sleep, your core body temperature must drop by about 2 or 3 degrees. This cooling is a fundamental signal that the day is over. In the aging body, this regulation becomes sluggish. Instead of a sharp drop in temperature, your body lingers in a state of warmth that keeps the brain in a light, easily disrupted stage of sleep. This is why you wake up in a sweat or feel restlessness in the middle of the night. The clock in the tower is trying to strike midnight, but the gears are stuck. When the master clock fragments, the foundation of your health begins to shake. You are no longer living in harmony with your biology. This fragmentation is the primary reason why 8 hours of sleep no longer feels like enough. It is not just about the quantity of time you spend in bed. It is about the precision of the timing. Without a synchronized clock, the cathedral of your sleep cannot be maintained, and the restoration your body craves remains just out of reach, lost in the gray space between wakefulness and true rest. As we descend further into the biology of the night, we must look at the physical architecture of the sleep itself. Imagine a grand cathedral with towering arches that disappear into the darkness. In your youth, these arches were massive and strong, representing the deep, slow-wave sleep that defined your nights. But as you cross the threshold of 40, those arches begin to sink. The structure is no longer grand. It is becoming compressed, shallow, and fragile. This is the shrinking cathedral of slow-wave sleep, and its decay is the silent driver of your daily exhaustion. You may still be spending the same amount of time in bed, but the interior space where restoration happens is collapsing. To understand this collapse, we have to look at the electrical signals of the brain. During the deepest stages of the night, your brain produces what are known as delta oscillations. These are slow, high-amplitude waves of electricity that sweep across the cortex. Think of them as the deep cleaning cycles of a massive machine. When you were 20, these waves were powerful and rhythmic, reaching high peaks and deep valleys. They were the physical manifestation of true recovery. However, research reviewed by our clinical pharmacist and researcher shows that the amplitude of these waves begins a steady decline after 40. The peaks are lower, and the valleys are shallower. Your brain is losing the power to generate the depth required for restorative sleep. This weakening of the delta waves means that even if you are unconscious for 8 hours, you are not truly resting. You are hovering in a state of biological limbo. The deep, heavy sleep that once felt like a thick blanket has been replaced by a thin, tattered sheet. This is why you wake up feeling as though you never truly left the world behind. The waves are too weak to pull you into the profound state of repair that your body needs to survive the coming day. You are sleeping, but you are not recovering. The situation is further complicated by a loss of protection within the brain. Deep within your skull sits the thalamus, a structure that acts as a sensory gatekeeper. During sleep, the thalamus generates rapid bursts of activity called sleep spindles. These spindles are like a biological noise-canceling system. They shield your brain from the outside world, preventing external sounds or internal shifts from waking you up. Your spindle density used to be high, creating a fortress of silence around your mind. But after 40, this density thins out. Your fortress is losing its walls. Because you have fewer spindles, your brain becomes hyper-vulnerable to the slightest interruption. A distant car door slamming or the faint creak of a floorboard is now enough to shatter your sleep because the thalamic gate is left wide open. This vulnerability is the reason for the dreaded 3 a.m. wakefulness. Without the protection of high-density spindles and the weight of strong delta waves, your brain cannot remain anchored in the deep stages of the night. You are cast out of the cathedral and into a state of frustrated alertness. Once you are awake, the brain struggles to find its way back down because the structural pathways to deep sleep have been eroded. It is like trying to climb back into a building whose stairs have been removed. You are left staring at the ceiling, trapped in the wreckage of a broken cycle. But the cost of this architectural decay goes beyond simple tiredness. It strikes at the very core of who you are, which is your memory. While you sleep, your brain performs a miracle called hippocampal sharp-wave ripple consolidation. This is the process where the experiences and lessons of the day are moved from short-term storage in the hippocampus to the long-term archives of the cortex. It is the physical act of learning. However, this process is entirely dependent on the quality of your slow-wave sleep. When the delta waves flatten and the sleep spindles vanish, this transfer of information is interrupted. This is why your memory feels porous after 40. The lessons of yesterday do not stick because the biological machinery required to save them is failing. You are not losing your mind, but you are losing the time required to maintain it. Your brain is attempting to save the files of your life into a system that is no longer receiving the signal. To ensure the biological accuracy of these insights, we continue to rely on the expertise of our clinical pharmacist and researcher, confirming that these changes are structural, not just psychological. The cathedral of your night is shrinking, and with it, the space where your history is written. The 8 hours you spend in bed are no longer a sanctuary. They have become a construction site where the workers have gone home, leaving the project unfinished and the structure exposed to the elements. As the physical depth of your sleep vanishes, the brain begins to struggle with a different kind of burden. The accumulation of everything that was meant to be washed away. The decay of the structural arches of your sleep is not merely an architectural tragedy. It is a functional disaster. While the shrinking cathedral of slow-wave sleep leaves you vulnerable to the noise of the night, it also halts the most critical maintenance project your body performs. To understand the gravity of this, we must look at a discovery that has revolutionized our understanding of the brain over the last decade. Deep within the tissue of your mind exists a hidden plumbing system known as the glymphatic convective flow. It is a network that remains largely dormant during your waking hours, waiting for the heavy curtains of deep sleep to fall before it begins its essential work. This is the unique waste management system, a series of microscopic channels that open up only when the brain cells themselves shrink in size, creating space for a cleansing tide of cerebrospinal fluid to rush through. In your youth, this system operated like a high-pressure wash cycle. Every night, as you descended into those deep delta waves we discussed, the valves would open and the fluid would sweep away the metabolic debris of the day. But as you pass the age of 40, the mechanical integrity of this system begins to fail. Specifically, the efficiency of the aquaporin 4-channel gating declines. These are the specialized water channels on the feet of support cells called astrocytes. They act as the biological valves of your brain's plumbing. In the aging brain, these channels become disorganized and less responsive. The gates do not open as wide, and they do not stay open as long. The convective flow that once roared through your neural pathways becomes a sluggish, shallow trickle. This mechanical failure leads to a state of internal stagnation. Throughout the day, your brain's high-energy activities produce toxic byproducts. One dangerous protein is amyloid beta, which is linked to cognitive decline. There is also the accumulation of tau proteins, which can tangle and choke the very neurons they are meant to support. When you were younger, these toxins were flushed out with surgical precision during the night. Now, because the glymphatic system is struggling, the clearance fails. Your brain is attempting to function while sitting in metabolic waste. This is the biological reality of the sensation you know as brain fog. It is not a lack of motivation. It is the physical result of interstitial clearance failure. When you wake up after a night of shallow sleep, that heavy, clouded feeling in your mind is the presence of yesterday's trash that was never collected. The wash cycle never triggered or finished its work. You are beginning your new day with a brain that is still chemically saturated with the exhaustion of the day before. This stagnation creates a toxic environment that further damages the delicate architecture of your sleep, creating a vicious cycle where poor sleep leads to a dirtier brain, and a dirtier brain leads to even worse sleep. Our clinical pharmacist and researcher emphasizes that this is not just about feeling tired. The link between glymphatic failure and neurodegeneration is profound. When these proteins aggregate, they form plaques and tangles that damage communication between your brain cells. This is the silent, slow-motion disaster occurring under the surface of your 40-year-old life. The lack of deep, slow-wave sleep means the valves of the aquaporin 4 channels are staying shut, locking the toxins inside. You are not just missing out on rest, you are losing the nightly opportunity to protect your future self from the ravages of decline. Biological stagnation is a heavy burden. It influences your mood, your focus, and your ability to process complex information. You feel as though the world is moving too fast, but the truth is that your brain is moving through a thick, invisible sludge of its own making. The shimmering clarity you remember from your 20s was not just a product of youth. It was a product of a clean neural environment. As the glymphatic flow weakens, the very landscape of your mind becomes cluttered and overwhelmed. The midnight fracture is not just a break in your rest. It is a dam that prevents the cleansing tide from reaching the shores of your consciousness. Every hour spent in the shallow stages of sleep is an hour where the trash of your metabolism remains in the corridors of your biological home. This biological stagnation does more than just cloud your thoughts and dampen your focus. It initiates a catastrophic breakdown of your endocrine system, shifting the very chemical foundation of who you are. To understand this, we must look at the hormones that define your vitality. Think of your youth as a time defined by the rhythmic pulse of growth hormone. This vital chemical is not just for children who are growing taller. For you, as an adult over the age of 40, growth hormone is the primary driver of tissue repair, muscle maintenance, and fat metabolism. It is the silent architect of your physical resilience and your ability to bounce back from the stresses of the day. The tragedy of the aging brain is the missing growth hormone pulse. In a healthy system, the vast majority of this hormone is released in a massive, singular surge during the first 2 hours of deep, slow-wave sleep. It is the body's nightly appointment with restoration. But as the architecture of your night collapses and your slow-wave sleep shrinks, that pulse begins to flicker and fade. This is known as somatotropic axis suppression. When that pulse is missed, the repair crew never arrives at the site of your weary muscles or your aging skin. This is why you may notice your body changing in ways that feel out of your control. You see your muscles softening despite your efforts at the gym, and you feel your metabolism slowing down, as if someone turned the dial of your energy levels to a lower setting. Your body has lost its nightly window for physical reconstruction because the signal, which is tied to the depth of your sleep, is too weak to be heard by the rest of your system. While the helpful hormones vanish, a far more destructive force begins to take their place in the darkness of your room. This is the disruption of the cortisol nocturnal nadir. In a balanced biological system, your levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, should reach their absolute lowest point around midnight. This period of low cortisol is what allows your heart rate to drop and your entire nervous system to enter a state of true, deep recovery. However, in the post-40 brain, the master clock is fragmented and the timing is lost. The stress response system, known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, enters a state of nocturnal dysregulation. Instead of staying low and quiet, your cortisol starts to rise hours before it should. It begins to climb at 2 or 3 in the morning, acting like a chemical alarm clock that has been set to the wrong time. This premature surge is the biological reason why you find yourself staring at the ceiling in the dead of night. Your mind is suddenly racing with anxieties and small worries that feel far more significant than they actually are. Your body is perceiving the lack of deep, stabilizing sleep as a state of immediate emergency. It is a biological feedback loop where the brain senses the architecture of sleep is failing and responds by flooding your blood with stress hormones to keep you alert. As this cortisol floods your system at the wrong hour, it begins to perform a silent act of sabotage on your long-term health. It binds to glucocorticoid receptors within the hippocampus, the very region of your brain responsible for regulating memory and the stress response itself. Our clinical pharmacist and researcher emphasizes that high nighttime cortisol does more than just wake you up. It actively erodes the health of the hippocampus. This creates a cruel cycle where the damage caused by the stress hormone makes it even harder for your brain to shut down the stress response the following night. You are not just tired. You are caught in a hormonal siege where your own survival mechanisms are being turned against the architecture of your rest. This is why the exhaustion of middle age feels so heavy and visceral. It is not a psychological fatigue that can be solved with a simple change in attitude or a quick nap. It is a state of total hormonal chaos. Your body feels heavy, unrecovered, and perpetually under pressure because your internal chemistry is telling you that the world is a dangerous place, even when you are safe in your own bed. This visceral weight is the result of your body being forced to exist in a state of high alert, while it should be in a state of deep repair. The metabolic consequences follow quickly. When growth hormone is low and cortisol is high, your body enters a storage mode rather than a repair mode. Your insulin sensitivity declines, and your body begins to cling to visceral fat, particularly around the midsection, as a survival response to the perceived stress of your sleeplessness. You are witnessing the metabolic slowing of the somatotropic axis in real time. This is the weight of the midnight fracture, a burden that you carry into the morning long after the sun has risen and the silence of the house has been broken. You are living in a state of biological emergency, and the cost of this emergency is being paid in the currency of your health, your mood, and your very longevity. Beyond the chaos of your hormones lies a deeper, more silent accumulation that dictates the very rhythm of your life. This is the buildup of adenosine, a molecule that serves as the biological scorekeeper of your waking hours. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, your brain begins to produce adenosine as a byproduct of energy consumption. It acts like a chemical hourglass, slowly filling up throughout the day. The more adenosine that binds to your adenosine alpha-1 and alpha-2 receptors, the more sleep pressure you feel. In your younger years, this system worked with surgical precision. You would build up enough pressure to fall into a deep, restorative sleep. And during those 8 hours, your brain would efficiently clear every trace of that chemical debt. You would wake up with a clean slate, a zeroed-out counter, ready to face the world with a fresh mind and a vibrant energy that felt effortless and natural to your being. However, after the age of 40, the machinery responsible for this clearance begins to falter. The biological pipes are increasingly clogged, and the neural enzymes are slower and less effective. This is the phenomenon of clearance failure. Even if you manage to stay in bed for a full 7 or 8 hours, your brain no longer possesses the structural capacity to reset the adenosine counter to 0. You are waking up with a residual debt, a leftover percentage of yesterday's exhaustion that has been carried over into the new day. This is the biological reason why the refreshed morning you are looking for never seems to arrive. You open your eyes, and instead of feeling the light of a new beginning, you feel the crushing weight of yesterday still pressing down on your eyelids. It is a biological tax that you are forced to pay every single day, and the interest on this debt is compounding, leading to a state of chronic underlying fatigue that no amount of weekend rest can resolve. To survive this daily burden, we reach for a chemical mask. We turn to caffeine. It is important to understand what is happening when you take that first sip. Caffeine does not provide energy. It is a molecular imposter. It has a structure similar to adenosine, allowing it to plug into those alpha-1 and alpha-2 receptors. By occupying these slots, it prevents the adenosine from sending the signal of tiredness. You feel alert because your brain is being lied to, but underneath that mask, the adenosine continues to build up. The pressure does not vanish. It simply piles up behind a closed door. When the caffeine breaks down, the floodgates open, and you are hit with a crash that feels twice as heavy as before. This is not a solution. It is a structural bypass that is actively damaging your neural landscape by forcing a state of confusion. This unresolved debt follows you back into the darkness of the night, creating a conflict during rapid eye movement sleep, also known as REM sleep. During REM, your body enters a state of atonia, a natural and necessary paralysis designed to keep you from physically acting out your dreams. However, when the pressure of adenosine remains too high, the transition between REM and wakefulness becomes blurred and jagged. You might find yourself trapped in the heavy, paralyzed state of atonia while your mind is partially conscious, a terrifying intersection of sleep pressure and forced stillness. Our clinical pharmacist and researcher have noted that this interference prevents the brain from achieving the high-quality emotional processing that REM sleep is supposed to provide. Instead of waking up emotionally regulated and resilient, you wake up irritable, anxious, and on edge because the clearing of the chemical debris never happened, as it did in the days of your youth. You must begin to see sleep not as a concession to your weakness or a pause in your productivity, but as the most active biological event of your day. By ignoring this clearance failure, you are trying to run a high-performance engine on old, dirty oil. The friction from this debt leads to a system breakdown. The brain fog you feel is the sound of that engine grinding. You are living under a debt that has never been settled, and your biology is crying out for a reset. Now that we have stripped away the illusions of modern sleep hacks and faced the cold reality of biological decay, we must turn toward the process of reclamation. This is not about supplements. It is about a fundamental restoration of the broken covenant between your brain and the night. We are moving from the realm of the quick fix into the serious work of biological repair. I am telling you this because no one else will. Society says your exhaustion is a byproduct of aging that you must accept. But your clinical pharmacist and your researcher see it differently. They see a system struggling to communicate with its environment, and they know that this communication can be restored with precision and patience. To begin this restoration, we must address the master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. After the age of 40, your internal clock needs a louder, clearer signal to stay in sync. This starts the moment you wake up. You must flood your retinas with high-intensity natural light within 30 minutes. This is not just a suggestion, it is a biological requirement for entrainment. This light signal travels directly to the master clock, telling it to start the countdown for melatonin production 14 hours later. By doing this, you are forcing the gears of your circadian rhythm back into alignment. Without this morning anchor, your internal timing will continue to drift, leaving you in that state of being tired but wired when the sun finally goes down. As we move into the evening, we must address the mechanical failure of temperature modulation. Your body needs a core temperature drop of about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit to initiate and maintain the deep stages of slow-wave sleep. For the over 40 brain, this cooling process is often sluggish. The most effective protocol, reviewed by our clinical pharmacist and researcher, is the paradoxical hot bath or shower 90 minutes before your bedtime. By heating the surface of your skin, you trigger a rapid vasodilation, where your body sends its internal heat to the surface to be released. When you step out of that warmth into a cool room, your core temperature plummets, mimicking the natural biological signal for the onset of deep sleep. This triggers your sleep architecture, we must also manage the pressure of adenosine. To allow your brain to clear the chemical debt we discussed, you must strictly observe a caffeine cutoff time of at least 10 to 12 hours before you go to bed. Even if you feel you can fall asleep after a late afternoon cup of coffee, the quality of your slow-wave sleep is being silently eroded. You are preventing the glymphatic system from doing its essential washing. By clearing the path for adenosine to bind naturally to its receptors in the early evening, you are ensuring that the sleep pressure is high enough to drive you into the deep rhythmic valleys where your brain is cleaned of metabolic waste. Join this journey by subscribing. This is not just about information. It is about building a community of people who refuse to let their vitality be stolen. We are committed to bringing you the deep truths that the clinical pharmacist and the researcher uncover, moving beyond the superficial and into the heart of what it means to live a vibrant, recovered life. Together, we can rebuild what the years tried to dismantle. As we conclude this exploration of the midnight fracture, I want you to reconsider the way you view the night. The 8 hours we often try to steal from ourselves to gain more time for work or family are, in fact, the only 8 hours that make the other 16 worth living. Without a restored sleep architecture, you are a ghost of your potential, navigating a world that feels muted and heavy. When you reclaim your sleep, you reclaim your memory, your metabolic health, and your emotional resilience. You are giving yourself the gift of a future where you are truly present and capable. Tonight, as you lie in the silence of your room, do not fear the 3 a.m. ceiling. Do not fear the darkness. See it as a sanctuary, a place where your brain is waiting to perform the quiet miracles of repair and renewal. The restoration is possible. The light of a restorative morning is not a relic. It is a promise of your future. Sleep well, and let the reclamation begin.